In order to get you a review, hopefully on launch day or maybe a couple of days later, I've completed the game on PC. For that reason, I'll be using some of the footage from PC for the gameplay and control section, and then when we get to the visuals and performance, we're obviously going to switch over to the Switch version. As far as gameplay goes, both versions are identical. For most who initially saw it, Cult of the Lamb instantly caught the eye. In a genre as saturated as roguelites, a developer has to do something truly unique. Massive Monsters' Cult of the Lamb does exactly that, with a very interesting art style and a premise both cute and horrific in equal measure, and it's thematically and tonally the polar opposite of their excellent Adventure Pals. A thanks to the publishers for the review copy. Is it an easy game to recommend, or perhaps a bit too difficult? Ouch. Well, let's find out. The bishops of the Old Faith have managed to imprison the one who waits, and the only ones to help him are the lambs who they've been working their way through. And when I say working their way through, I mean slaying them. You are the last, and as such, the narrative begins with your head quite literally on the block. After you find that pesky appendage removed from your body, the one who waits manages to bring you back. How does he do this? Well, he adorns you with the crown of power, essentially gifting you with many powers and entreating you to go and kill the bishops, thus unchaining and freeing him. And as we've said so many times before, that's where your adventure begins. There are other characters that you'll meet throughout your adventure. The majority of these will be found when out crusading. Through interaction, you'll also unlock specific areas on a large world map, and there are also some side quests in these areas as well. Now, Cult of the Lamb is split into 3 different gameplay areas. The Crusades, which I've just mentioned, see you going on missions to defeat those different priests. You have to undertake these in a given order, as the doors simply won't open until you've defeated the last boss. You'll need to complete 4 different runs before the final boss becomes unlocked, and here's how they go. Upon entering the area, you'll be given a choice of 2 weapons. There's a main and the secondary. The secondary weapon requires a form of ammo known as fervor, and it's through the collection of these small red balls that you'll be able to fire your curses. The curses are essentially ranged attacks, from projectiles to ground pounds, to my personal favourite, the tentacles, which rip up through the floor. The primary weapons are split into speed and damage. I was a bit disappointed that there wasn't a DPS indicator, as that seems the most important statistic. Just as with other familiar titles, runs towards the boss are split over several stages, and divided across a hidden map into unique rooms. Some rooms will simply have enemies that need to be defeated, and once done so, a chest will pop up in the middle, usually gaining you some coins and some of that fervor. Others will have cards which will improve your abilities. There's around 30 of these to find, and through side quests they can be unlocked or defeating bosses. They can also be found hidden away in chests. These are quite standard, increasing the rate of damage or speed, or perhaps offering you a percentage chance of enemies dropping a heart. They're a standard mechanic and they work well. I would have liked more of them. Unlocking the 30 or so doesn't take a great deal of time. Now, the combat itself is relatively straightforward. Your main attack has a 1-button press, and your secondary may require you to hold a button down to aim. Other than that, there's a dodge roll which avoids all damage, and enemies will flash before they attack. The Crusades start out relatively easy, but there are 3 difficulty options to choose from: easy, medium and hard. If you're accustomed to more difficult roguelites, I'd personally suggest playing on hard mode, but having the option here is a nice addition, not something you usually see in this style of game. Your Crusades will lead you to a variety of different dungeon environments, and several unique encounters can take place. With the main goal of defeating the priest of each area, there are times when they'll pop up and have a few things to say to you, or they may even curse your village, sending a plague to it, or causing your entire populace to defecate themselves, which is unfortunate. Now, it's worth noting at this point that the village is actually existing and operating while you're out on your adventures. This means that you know that every minute you're away, they're getting hungrier, or someone might have died, and it's a subtle but clever mechanic that small pieces of information are fed onto the screen at times, which can really change the feeling of pressure on the player and mean that you almost want to get home rather than go in and finishing that final boss. And you'll have to fight a few bosses before you fight the priest of each area. But again, having been spoiled by Binding of Isaac, I was left wanting a few more of these. So you've had a successful run, you're teleported back to your home base, and this is where your budding community live. Now, as their leader, it's up to you to try and cater for all of their problems. They might ask you for more food, or perhaps a new bed. You can task them with collecting wood, gathering, worshipping at the altar, or even send them out as missionaries. And it's important during your crusades to try and recruit new members. You can change their designs, the looks of them, the colours, even renaming them if you choose to. There's a ton of new skins to unlock as well as character designs. Through interacting, gifting, and overawing your community, you'll gain their loyalty. Now, the higher the loyalty, the more devotion they'll generate. When a follower levels up, they'll provide you with a commandment stone. 3 of these combined allow you to make new doctrines for your community, and the simulation aspect comes from balancing these different areas: faith, hunger, and hygiene. You can perform sermons to boost the faith of your community, but that also generates a currency which acts as an experience point. When you reach a threshold, you can then provide a new doctrine relating to one of 5 different areas. For example, telling them that death isn't a bad thing and allowing you to sacrifice your followers without the penalty of everyone getting absolutely terrified and vomiting on the ground. Oh, it gets real dark. It's through performing these sermons and leveling up that you'll gain new weapons and ability cards as well. The importance of all of these upgrades are they allow you to cater for your community's needs, but they also help you to deal with any issues. Sometimes you might get a dissenting voice. They move around the village, spreading dissent in the ears of those who follow you. But you may have a doctrine which allows you to murder anyone you want, or perhaps sacrifice them, literally turn them into food and feed them to your community. Although I've got to be honest, that doesn't always go down very well. However, on the reverse of that, you can build things like prisons and throw them in, but on the flip, you could create a doctrine which essentially values freedom, so that at the start of each day, all your followers get a bonus as long as no one's in prison. Without this aspect of the game, I don't think Cult of the Lamb would have enough to keep me enticed, but it brings balance to a good, if not great, roguelite section. The final area then is the overworld map, which allows you to move to specific places. There's a fishing village where you can perform some jobs to repair a lighthouse and catch several different fish. There's a game which you can wager on and undertake in the forest, a mushroom god, and a few other little secrets that we don't want to spoil. The majority of your game time though is either spent in your village dealing with the needs and wants of your community, gathering up all the devotion to then use the divine inspiration to unlock new buildings and structures, and then sending them all out to do the hard work. You can do all of this manually as well, but ideally you don't want to. As well as this, you'll be decorating things and making everything look pretty, scooping poo or sick, or just quietly moving dead bodies, and going out on crusades, coming back and performing a new sermon each day and recruiting new members to your cult. It's a really enjoyable take on roguelite, with some sprinklings of things like Dungeon Keeper of old, but as alluded to, there's not enough variety for me when out on those crusades, both visually and in terms of the content, and there's a few tweaks needed, like the very tiny map. You could use a button to make that full screen, as although you won't get lost, you do still need to use this. For gameplay, I give Cult of the Lamb 16 out of 20, and the controls also score 16 out of 20. Now on Nintendo Switch, it runs at 30 frames per second. That's the biggest difference compared to the PC version. This was a real shame, as I was hoping for 60. In a game that requires such fast movements, 60 is almost compulsory. Look at something like Hades. It runs on the Unity engine, which is notorious on the Nintendo Switch for having some issues. They're probably compounded to my eye because I've played so much of this with 60 FPS, so switching to 30 is slightly unusual, but there are definitely stutters here, and there are also some frame rate inconsistencies. It's not a complete disaster, and I should imagine the patch that downloads automatically when you download the game and play on launch day has improved things significantly, and probably is why we didn't get codes earlier. It is nice that they've included an option to turn off the screen shake, as I really don't like that, and there's a text size option so you can increase all of the text in the game. Any issues are mitigated when playing in handheld mode just by the nature of the smaller screen, and this is by far my preferred way to play. Currently on the Switch version, there's a bit of work to be done to smooth everything out. It's passable, but it's not as good as it could be. Visually, Cult of the Lamb has a very unique art style. It falls somewhere between cel-shaded and hand-drawn. With those inverse kinematic style animations, it looks great. Artistically speaking, it's a lovely game to look at. On the compositional front, Naranja Johnson has done a great job. And I enjoyed the nonsense speak of other characters, emphasising that already unique atmosphere. Visually, we can certainly see the inspirations that Massive Monster's other titles have had. The Adventure Powers, for example, has one of the most beautiful art styles I think I've ever seen. In handheld, everything holds up well. Visuals and performance score 14 out of 20. Audio scores 18 out of 20. Cult of the Lamb clocks in at £22.49 or your regional equivalent and has a download of 1.5 gigs. You're looking at anywhere from around 10 to 20 hours in terms of length. You could do the game much faster than this, but it would mean completely forsaking your village and missing out on most of the enjoyment. It's unique enough to warrant a playthrough, and that price point's not a mistake. It's exactly the same as Hades, and it's significantly cheaper than The Binding of Isaac, but it's also not quite as good as both of those games. If you're a fan of the genre, you're going to have a really enjoyable time, and my only real critique is just wanting more enemy variety, more bosses, and certainly more weapon varieties. Still, it's a good game and it's enjoyable, and I would give value 16 out of 20. I've no doubt that Cult of the Lamb will sell like the hottest of hotcakes. I look forward to seeing what the developer can do with the game as it goes forward, and I'm intrigued to find out how you guys found it. It gets an overall SwitchUp score of 80%. Thanks to all of you, to our new patrons. If you want to join them, all the links are in the description. And yeah, as always, for all things Switch all the time, keep it SwitchUp. Cheers guys, see ya!